This morning, harrowing new details of a 32-year-old man now free after allegedly being held captive for decades. His stepmother taken into custody.
This is the worst treatment of humanity that I've ever witnessed.
We're going to dive deep into this wild story of a man who was held hostage for over 20 years and was just recently released. Let's jump in.
I'm Keisha Grant.
And I'm Mike Heidick. The big story continues. You heard it right. Kimberly Sullivan is out on bond tonight, walking free after her hearing earlier today.
Now, I already got to stop. Somebody help me understand. This woman is being accused of holding this man hostage for 20 years, and she's out on bond. Now, I've seen parts of this video, and they're going to give some weak reason why they felt as if she shouldn't be held, but I'm just dumbfounded by it. Let me know what your thoughts are.
While the judge is allowing her to go home, there are some conditions to her release.
We're bringing you live team coverage tonight of the shocking case. We start with NBC Connecticut's Amanda Pitts with more on what happened in court. Amanda.
Yeah, Mike, Keisha, Kimberly Sullivan posted bond this afternoon at about 1:45 here at Waterbury Superior Court, posting 10% of her $300,000 bond. State prosecutors tried to get her under 24/7 home confinement. The judge ultimately denied that, instead putting her under a very strict supervision. All this while the investigation into how this could have possibly happened is just beginning.
If there's anybody here watching who is familiar with Connecticut law, did they suffer through this whole bail reform thing where basically everyone gets bail? I know they're pretty progressive, pretty liberal up there in parts of Connecticut. So if so, I wouldn't be shocked, because I know New York was dealing with a lot of that nonsense, and New Jersey in different parts. But if you know a little bit more about bail reform and whether that impacted Connecticut or not, let me know in the comments. I'd appreciate it.
A welcome sign on the front door to an alleged house of horrors.
33 years of law enforcement. This is the worst treatment of humanity that I've ever witnessed.
The boarded up home on Blake Street in
And you got to think, 33 years, dude's been in law enforcement over half of my life. He said he's never seen anything like this as far as a human being mistreated. But yet this woman could get out on bail. Ridiculous.
Waterbury is where a now 32-year-old says he was held captive by his stepmother, Kimberly Sullivan, for 20 years.
Always upstairs on the second floor window, and he always seemed like he was trapped there.
First responders were called to the home last month after investigators say the victim set a fire in his 8x9 room using a lighter, hand sanitizer, and paper because he wanted his freedom, according to court documents. They reported the door to the room having.
Imagine how obsessive you have to be to want your freedom, where you're willing to risk possibly setting the whole house on fire because you want to get out. Man, oh man, that's wild.
Multiple locks on the outside, and when found, the victim, according to court documents, was extremely emaciated. His hair was matted and unkempt. He was very dirty, and his teeth all appear to be rotten.
Make sure you pay attention here, because they're going to get into his physical state. They've already mentioned his rotting teeth and his hair and being emaciated, but pay attention to what's coming up next. It's going to blow your mind.
This victim, 31 years old, was 5'9", 68 pounds. He was in the stages of dying.
I'm about to play it again. Pay attention.
Was 5'9", 68 pounds. He was in the stages of dying.
He didn't say 168 pounds. 5'9", 68 pounds. I mean, can you even fathom that? When I was a kid, I was always a big kid. When I was in like the second or third grade, I think I was 80 pounds. So I was a big kid. I wasn't fat, but I always had a good amount of muscle. I wore it pretty well. But I was weighing 80 pounds when I was in the second and third grade. And a lot of kids thought I was big back then. But can you imagine a grown man, 31 years old, 5'9" tall, and being that skinny? My God. It's a travesty. It's a horror. They put it perfectly. A house of horrors. And I can only imagine the conditions inside that place.
He told police he recalled drinking water from the toilet due to the fact that he was only getting about 2 cups of water per day and was pulled out of school in the 4th grade as an 11-year-old because DCF was called after he'd steal others' food and sometimes eat food out of the garbage.
We knew it. We reported it. Not a damn thing was done. That's the tragedy of the whole thing.
So he went to school, it sounds like. He was being sent to school. And the former principal is talking, and you can see his frustration just by his body language. They reported it, but nothing ever came from it. They knew something was wrong. They probably saw his physical condition back then. And God only knows what else. Man, our systems are very broken. Now, I understand that they want to respect people's right to raise their children how they want to, largely, like obviously within the law. And having someone's kids taken away, it's a big deal. Being a cop in law enforcement for all the years that I was, it doesn't happen often. And there were many situations where I wanted to see somebody's kids taken away, but they had a different standard. It would take a lot in order to get someone's kids removed. It took quite a bit, but a situation like this is just really heartbreaking that this man had to suffer like he did.
Waterbury's chief says they have no record of that complaint. Police did make a welfare check in 2005 at the request of DCF.
Officers went to the house. The house was clean. It was lived in. They spoke to the victim at that point in time, and there were no cause for any alarm.
Sullivan is now facing assault and kidnapping charges, posting bond on Thursday, the judge ordering her to be under intense probation supervision.
Now, he said that back in 2005, the police showed up there and they talked to the victim. We're talking 20 years ago. He was 12 or 11 or 12 years old. What kind of response do you expect him to give? He was probably used to living like this for, forever, all of his life, or a good portion of his life. You have to be really discerning as a cop. I'm not saying that he was under those same conditions 20 years ago. I don't know. But there was a big enough concern to where people called and contacted the police and said, hey, there's a problem here.
No cause for any alarm.
Sullivan is now facing assault and kidnapping charges, posting bond on Thursday, the judge ordering her to be under intense probation supervision. Her attorney maintaining her innocence, pinning the blame on her late husband, who died last year and was wheelchair bound.
This was the biological son of her now deceased husband. She is the stepmother. And so this father did dictate everything as to the upbringing and everything else.
I'm sure she's going to push for she was abused herself, very much manipulated. All those things could be factual. All those things could be true. So I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. But with him being wheelchair bound, he's very limited. With him having died a year ago, explain to me what happened over the last few months. Those are just some of the questions I'm asking.
Now, the Department of Children and Families did release a statement this afternoon saying, we are shocked and saddened for the victim and at the unspeakable conditions he endured. As a result, DCF has looked extensively at our current and historical databases and to date have been unable to locate any records pertaining to this family, nor any records connected to the names of others who have indicated they made reports to our department. Now, as for Sullivan, she's due back here in court on March 26th. Live in Waterbury, Amanda Pitts, NBC Connecticut News. Mike and Keisha.
Amanda Pitts with the very latest. We continue our live team coverage now with NBC Connecticut's Matt Austin.
He's been hearing from the community about the case. Matt, how are they reacting?
Yeah, this is a real heartbreaking case for so many in this community, including for some longtime officers here. Now, some are wondering if the man had been spotted potentially over recent years.
Finding out that someone was allegedly held captive in this house in Waterbury for about 2 decades was a shock to a next-door neighbor who has lived here for 10 years.
To know I was right by here this whole time, and he was going through that suffering, it's heartbreaking. I hope he'll be okay.
Zephyr Guadin.
How do you think you would feel, y'all, if you found out that there was a neighbor, someone living next door, maybe even somebody that you had been in contact with, was holding someone like that? Do you think it would impact you emotionally? Maybe you would think that there was something you could have done? Because honestly, who knows how often this happens in our nation, let alone around the world. But it makes you wonder, how often do situations like this go down? And is it possible that somebody right down your street, a neighbor, could be doing this to someone? But if someone is really motivated to keep their lifestyle a secret, there may be no way you could have found out, honestly.
Nara tells us years ago, a family member playing outside potentially spotted the alleged victim, who might have looked like a kid.
She was just a 10-year-old child on the swing, doing what kids do, looked up in the window, saw a little child. She said had a baseball cap on. He waved to her. She waved to him. And that was it. He walked away, and she never saw him again.
At this point, the now 32-year-old's name has not yet been released or where he's recovering.
Now, if it was him, it could be the fact that he was just so unhealthy looking that she thought he was a kid.
The mayor has asked people to respect his privacy.
It's truly a horrifying, and it's beyond comprehension what occurred here. The young man's unimaginable suffering over the course of 2 decades is just a reminder of the darkness that does exist in our world.
This case has stunned even veteran officers. We're told investigators collected and brought him items like clothing and books as he begins his recovery.
Our plan is to continue to support him. He's going to need a lot of support as he travels through this and tries to figure out how to navigate what has occurred and what the future holds for him.
Now, that next door neighbor we heard from says he's not certain that he ever saw the man, but he does wonder if that's who was outside doing chores sometimes. Live in Waterbury.
Yeah, it's pretty disturbing, y'all. The Bible is very clear as it reminds us about the heart of a man and how deceitful and desperately wicked it can be and is. So I think that should always be a reminder. Now, we shouldn't always assume that everybody we come in contact with is capable of this level of depravity or is actually acting out on it. But we also need to be reminded that we all possess a sinful nature, and the depths of which each individual can reach, God only knows. It should just help those of us who are believers to be reminded of being faithful witnesses and to share the gospel when we can, because the work of the Holy Spirit on the most evil of hearts, we can't even fathom what God can do potentially. But let me know what you think. Comment down below. If you appreciate content like this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. But before you go, make sure you check out this video right here. I think you'll find it very, very informative.